The basement was always cold, even in summer. She sat there every evening after school, her fingers moving across the worn piano keys that her parents had bought secondhand 5 years ago. The paint was chipped on some of the white keys, and middle C stuck slightly when you pressed it too hard. But to her it was perfect. Her name was Elena, and at 17, most of her classmates had no idea she could play piano at all. She wasn't the type to talk about her hobbies or share videos on social media. While other kids posted about their lives constantly, she preferred the quiet solitude of her practice sessions, where it was just her and the music, nobody watching, nobody judging. The coffee shop where she worked on weekends smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon rolls. She would arrive at 6 in the morning, tie her hair back, and spend 4 hours making lattes and wiping down tables. The money wasn't much, but it was enough to pay for her piano lessons with Mrs. Chen, a woman in her 70s who had once performed in concert halls across Europe before retiring to their small town. Mrs. Chen was strict, but kind. She would tap her wooden cane against the floor when Elena rushed through a difficult passage, and she would nod silently when something was played just right. There was no excessive praise, no coddling, just honest feedback that pushed Elena to improve week after week. One Tuesday afternoon in March, everything changed. Elena was sitting in the school cafeteria, picking at her sandwich and scrolling through her phone, when her friend Jessica practically ran to the table, her eyes bright with excitement. "Did you see this?" Jessica shoved her phone in Elena's face. On the screen was an announcement from the Riverside Music Conservatory, one of the most prestigious music schools in the state. They were holding open auditions for their annual summer showcase, an event that attracted hundreds of talented young musicians from all over the region. Elena's heart skipped a beat as she read the details. The showcase was a big deal. Students who performed well often received scholarship opportunities, and some had even gone on to study at top music schools. But the thought of playing in front of judges, in front of an audience, made her stomach turn. "You have to audition," Jessica said, sliding into the seat across from her. "You're amazing at piano. I've heard you play at my house, remember?" Elena shook her head quickly. "I don't perform in public. That's not really my thing, but why not? What's the point of being good at something if you never share it?" That question stuck with Elena for the rest of the day. What was the point? She had been playing piano for 6 years, practicing almost every single day, learning pieces that most people her age couldn't dream of tackling. Yet she had never played for anyone except Mrs. Chen, her parents, and occasionally Jessica when she came over. That evening, she mentioned the audition to Mrs. Chen during her lesson. Her teacher was silent for a long moment, her weathered hands folded in her lap before she finally spoke. "Do you want to audition?" she asked simply. Elena wasn't sure how to answer. Part of her desperately wanted to see if she could actually do it, if her playing meant anything beyond the 4 walls of her basement. But another part of her was terrified of failing, of being judged and found lacking. "I think so," she said quietly. "But I'm scared." Mrs. Chen smiled, a rare expression that softened her usually stern features. "Fear is a sign that something matters to you. If you weren't scared, it wouldn't be worth doing." Over the next 3 weeks, Elena prepared. She chose a Mozart piece, something elegant but manageable, something that would show her technical skill without being overly ambitious. Mrs. Chen helped her polish every phrase, every dynamic change, until the piece felt like second nature. The morning of the audition arrived gray and drizzly. Elena barely slept the night before, running through the piece in her mind over and over, her fingers twitching against her blanket as if playing invisible keys. Her mother drove her to the conservatory, a beautiful old building with stone columns and tall windows that looked like something from a different era. Inside, the lobby was chaos. Dozens of students milled about with their parents, some warming up on portable keyboards, others pacing nervously while clutching sheet music. Elena signed in at the registration desk, her hand shaking slightly as she wrote her name. The woman behind the desk gave her a number, 43, and told her to wait until she was called. She found a seat in the corner and tried to calm her breathing. Around her, she could hear snippets of conversation. One boy was talking loudly about how he had been accepted to a summer program at Juilliard. A girl nearby was running through scales, her fingers flying with practiced ease. Everyone seemed so confident, so prepared, so much better than her. An hour passed. Then another. Elena watched as number after number was called, watched students disappear through the double doors that led to the auditorium, then emerge 15 minutes later looking either elated or deflated. Some had clearly nailed their auditions. Others looked like they wanted to cry. Finally, after what felt like forever, she heard it. Number 43. Her legs felt like jelly as she stood up. She gathered her sheet music, took a deep breath, and walked toward those double doors. The hallway beyond was dimly lit, and her footsteps echoed on the polished floor. At the end of the hall, another set of doors stood open, revealing the auditorium beyond. It was bigger than she had imagined. Rows of red velvet seats stretched back into darkness, and at the front, bathed in stage lights, sat a magnificent grand piano. Behind a long table in the front row sat 3 judges, their faces barely visible in the shadows. Elena walked across the stage, her footsteps seeming impossibly loud in the vast space. She placed her sheet music on the piano's music stand and sat down on the bench, adjusting its height slightly. Her hands were trembling. From the darkness, one of the judges spoke. His voice was flat, almost bored. Name? Elena Rodriguez, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What will you be playing today? Mozart, Piano Sonata No. 16 in C major. There was a pause, then some whispering between the judges. One of them, a man with silver hair and glasses, leaned forward slightly. She could see his face now, could see the tired expression, the way he glanced at his watch. All right, he said, waving his hand dismissively. We're running behind schedule, so just play something simple so we can evaluate your basic technique. Keep it brief. Something inside Elena crumbled at those words. Play something simple.
Keep it brief.
She had spent 3 weeks preparing, had practiced until her fingers ached, had barely slept from nerves, and this was how they greeted her. Like she was just another name on a list to check off, another obligation to get through before lunch. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play, but the notes felt hollow. Each phrase she had so carefully practiced now seemed mechanical, lifeless. She could hear the perfection in her technique, but she couldn't feel any soul in it. This wasn't music. This was just sound, just notes in the correct order, signifying nothing. Halfway through the second line, she stopped. Her hands froze above the keys, and the silence that followed was deafening. The silence in the auditorium felt like it was pressing down on her from all sides. Elena's hands hovered above the piano keys, frozen in midair. She could feel her heart hammering in her chest, could hear the blood rushing in her ears. From the darkness where the judges sat, she heard movement. Papers rustling, someone clearing their throat. The man with the silver hair and glasses looked up from whatever he had been writing. Is there a problem? His voice carried across the empty space between them, flat and impatient. Do you need to start over? Elena's mouth felt dry. She opened it to speak, but no words came out at first. What could she possibly say? That she had stopped because the music felt wrong? That playing something simple and brief suddenly seemed like a waste of everything she had worked for? Around her, the auditorium seemed to stretch endlessly, those red velvet seats staring at her like 100 silent witnesses. The stage lights felt too hot, too bright. She could feel sweat beginning to form on her palms. But then something shifted inside her. It started as a tiny spark, barely noticeable, like the first hint of dawn on a dark horizon. She thought about all those mornings at the coffee shop, wiping down tables and making drinks for people who barely looked at her. She thought about the basement where she practiced, that cold room where nobody ever heard her play. She thought about 6 years of pouring her heart into music that had never left those 4 walls. And she thought about why she had fallen in love with piano in the first place. It wasn't because of Mozart, though she appreciated his genius. It wasn't because of technique or theory or any of the mechanical things that could be measured and graded. It was because of one rainy afternoon when she was 11 years old, sitting in her aunt's living room and hearing a piece of music that made her cry without understanding why. That piece had moved something deep inside her, had touched a place where words couldn't reach. That was when she knew she wanted to make music, not just play notes. She wanted to make people feel something real. Elena looked up at the judges, at their tired faces and their clipboards and their watches. She saw them for what they were, people who had probably listened to 100 Mozart sonatas already, people who were just trying to get through a long day of auditions, people who expected nothing surprising or remarkable from audition number 43. She took a breath and finally found her voice. Can I play something different? The words came out quieter than she intended, but they were clear enough. The silver-haired judge frowned. You're supposed to play what's listed on your audition form. I know, Elena said, her voice growing slightly stronger. But could I please play something else instead? Something I really want to play? The three judges looked at each other. The woman on the left, who hadn't spoken yet, leaned back in her chair with her arms crossed. The man on the right tapped his pen against his clipboard. The silver-haired man in the middle checked his watch again and let out a long sigh. We're already behind schedule, he said. But fine. You have 5 minutes. Play whatever you want, 5 minutes. That was all she had. 5 minutes to prove that she belonged here. That she was more than just another name on a list, more than just basic technique and simple melodies. Elena turned back to the piano and closed her eyes. Her sheet music for the Mozart piece still sat on the music stand, but she didn't need it anymore. She pushed it aside, letting it fall to the floor beside the bench. She didn't need sheet music for what she was about to play. For months now, longer than she had been preparing for this audition, she had been secretly working on something else. A piece that Mrs. Chen had shown her once, almost casually, during a lesson when they had finished early. This is one of the most famous piano pieces ever written, Mrs. Chen had said, playing the opening chords, but it's also one of the most difficult. You're not ready for it yet. The piece was Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. Mrs. Chen was right, of course. It was far beyond what Elena should have been attempting at her level. The technical demands were enormous. The emotional depth required was something most pianists didn't achieve until they had decades of experience. But Elena hadn't been able to get it out of her head. That night after the lesson, she had gone home and looked up recordings of it online. She had listened to it dozens of times, then hundreds. She had watched videos of famous pianists performing it, studying their hands, their expressions, the way they breathed with the music. And then very quietly, very secretly, she had started learning it. Not during her official practice time, not when her parents might hear. Late at night, after everyone had gone to bed, she would sneak down to the basement and work on it with the volume turned almost all the way down, her fingers barely making a sound as they moved across the keys. She had never planned to perform it. It was just for her, just something to prove to herself that she could do it. But now, sitting on this stage with 5 minutes to show these judges who she really was, she couldn't think of anything else worth playing. Elena positioned her hands over the keys, her fingers finding their places automatically. Her right hand rested high on the keyboard, her left hand low. She took one more breath, feeling her ribcage expand and contract, feeling the air fill her lungs and then release. And then she began. The opening chord exploded from the piano like thunder, deep, resonant, powerful. It wasn't gentle or pretty or simple. It was raw and honest and real. The sound filled the entire auditorium, bouncing off the walls and ceiling, demanding attention. Elena didn't play carefully. She didn't hold back or try to be perfect. She threw herself into the music completely, letting it take control of her hands, her arms, her whole body. The famous descending bass line rumbled through the lower registers while her right hand answered with sharp, insistent chords. This was the piece that had made her cry when she was 11. This was the piece that reminded her why music mattered. Every note carried weight, carried meaning, carried something that couldn't be expressed any other way. Her fingers flew across the keys, moving through passages she had practiced 1,000 times in secret. The fast runs, the wide leaps, the complex harmonies that seemed to stack on top of each other, like waves building toward a storm. Some of it wasn't perfect. She stumbled slightly on one of the runs in the middle section. Her timing wavered for just a moment during a particularly difficult transition. But none of that mattered because the emotion was there. The truth was there. The piece built and built, climbing toward its climax with an almost desperate intensity. Her hands ached. Her forearms burned with effort. Sweat dripped down her back, soaking through her shirt. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop until she had played every single note. The auditorium around her disappeared. The judges disappeared. Her fear disappeared. There was only the music, only this moment. Only the feeling of being completely alive and completely present. The middle section arrived and the music suddenly softened. After all that power and intensity, it became almost tender, almost fragile. This was the part that had always made her cry. These delicate, floating phrases that seemed to hang in the air like questions without answers. Elena played them as gently as she could, her touch feather light on the keys, letting each note ring out fully before moving to the next. This was the heart of the piece, the vulnerable center hidden beneath all that thunder and drama. But it didn't last. The intensity returned, building once more toward the final statement. Her left hand pounded out those famous chords again, stronger than before, more insistent, more certain. The music demanded to be heard, demanded to matter, demanded to leave a mark on everyone listening. And then, with 3 final crashing chords that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building, it was over. Elena's hands remained on the piano keys for a moment after the final chord faded into silence. Her chest was heaving, her breath coming in short gasps, as if she had just run a marathon. The sound of the Rachmaninoff still seemed to hang in the air around her, echoing in her ears even though the auditorium was now completely quiet. She slowly lifted her hands from the keys and placed them in her lap. They were trembling. Actually, her whole body was trembling. It was only then that she realized tears were streaming down her face. She didn't know when she had started crying. Somewhere during the middle section, probably. During those fragile, tender phrases that always got to her. Elena blinked, trying to clear her vision, and became aware of where she was again. The stage. The auditorium. The judges sitting in the darkness in front of her. Reality came crashing back all at once, and with it came a wave of panic so intense she thought she might be sick. What had she just done? She had ignored the audition requirements. She had played a piece far beyond her supposed skill level. She had cried in front of the judges, which was probably the least professional thing a musician could do. And worst of all, she had probably made mistakes. She couldn't remember the performance clearly now, but there had definitely been moments where her fingers hadn't landed quite right, where the timing had wavered. The silence stretched on. 1 second. 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10. Nobody was saying anything. Nobody was moving. Elena couldn't even hear anyone breathing. The quiet was so complete it felt like the entire building was holding its breath. She wiped her eyes quickly with the back of her hand and tried to compose herself. She should probably stand up, collect her things, and leave the stage. They were clearly not impressed. They were probably annoyed that she had wasted their time with such an arrogant display. But then something unexpected happened. From somewhere in the darkness at the back of the auditorium, she heard a sound. It took her a moment to recognize what it was because it seemed so out of place. It was clapping. Someone was applauding. Then another person joined in. And another. The sound grew, spreading through the auditorium like ripples on water. Elena squinted toward the back of the space, trying to see who was clapping. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out shapes moving in the shadows. Other students, the ones who had been waiting for their turn to audition. They had been listening from the wings, from the back rows, and now they were applauding. Some of them were even standing up. Elena felt a fresh wave of tears threatening to spill over, but these felt different. Not tears of fear or exhaustion, but something else. Something that felt almost like relief mixed with disbelief. The applause continued for what felt like a long time, though it was probably only 30 seconds or so. Then gradually it faded, and the auditorium fell quiet again. Elena turned back to face the judges, waiting for their verdict, waiting to be dismissed. The silver-haired man with glasses was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. His mouth was slightly open, and he had removed his glasses, which he was now cleaning absently with a cloth from his pocket. The woman on the left had leaned forward in her chair, her elbows on the table, her chin resting on her clasped hands. The man on the right was still holding his pen, but he had stopped writing. Finally, the silver-haired man in the middle spoke. His voice was different now. The bored, impatient tone was gone, replaced with something that sounded almost like wonder. "How long have you been playing piano?" Elena's voice came out scratchy and rough. She cleared her throat and tried again. 6 years. The 3 judges looked at each other. The woman on the left raised her eyebrows. The man on the right shook his head slightly, as if he couldn't quite believe what he had just heard. 6 years, the silver-haired man repeated slowly. He put his glasses back on and looked down at the papers in front of him, then back up at Elena. "And who is your teacher?" "Mrs. Chen, Victoria Chen. She used to perform in Europe before she retired." The woman on the left suddenly sat up straighter. Victoria Chen? The Victoria Chen who played with the Berlin Philharmonic? Elena nodded, not trusting her voice anymore. She hadn't known her teacher was that famous. Mrs. Chen never talked about her performing days. She just focused on the music, on the work, on getting better. The woman judge was smiling now, actually smiling. Victoria was one of the finest pianists of her generation. If she's teaching you, then you're very fortunate. I know, Elena managed to say. I work weekends to pay for the lessons. Something shifted in the atmosphere after she said that. The judges exchanged another look, this one longer and more meaningful. The silver-haired man leaned back in his chair and folded his arms across his chest, studying Elena with an intensity that made her want to look away. That piece you just played, he said slowly, the Rachmaninoff Prelude. That's not a piece for beginners, it's not even a piece for intermediate players. Most conservatory students don't attempt it until their third or fourth year. Elena felt her stomach drop. Here it came. The criticism. The lecture about attempting music beyond her abilities. About being arrogant and presumptuous. I'm sorry, she started to say. I know I wasn't supposed to play it. I know it wasn't perfect. I made mistakes and... The man held up his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Let me finish, he said, but his voice wasn't angry. You did make mistakes. Your technique in some passages was rough. Your timing wavered in places. Your dynamics could have been more controlled. Elena felt like she was shrinking into the piano bench. Every word was a confirmation of her worst fears. But, the man continued, and that single word seemed to hang in the air between them. In 23 years of conducting auditions at this conservatory, I have rarely, very rarely, heard someone play with such genuine feeling, such honest emotion. You didn't play that piece to impress us, you played it because you needed to, because the music demanded it. Elena stared at him, not quite understanding what she was hearing. Was that a compliment? Was he saying she had done well? The woman on the left spoke up, her voice warm and encouraging. What my colleague is trying to say, perhaps not as clearly as he could, is that you have something special. Technical skill can be taught. Perfect timing can be learned. But what you showed us just now, that connection to the music, that vulnerability and courage, that's something that can't be taught. You either have it or you don't. And you have it. The words washed over Elena like warm water. She felt dizzy, like the stage was tilting beneath her. This wasn't how she had imagined this moment going. She had expected rejection, disappointment, maybe a polite thank you for trying. She had never expected this. The man on the right, who hadn't spoken at all until now, finally broke his silence. His voice was gruff, but not unkind. Miss Rodriguez, have you considered applying to our pre-college program? Elena shook her head. I didn't know there was a pre-college program. It's for advanced high school students, he explained. You would take classes here on weekends and some evenings. Theory, music history, ear training, plus private lessons with one of our faculty members. It's quite rigorous, but I think you could handle it. The silver-haired man nodded in agreement. In fact, if you're interested, we would like to offer you a full scholarship to the program. Your audition today was more than sufficient to qualify. Elena felt like she couldn't breathe. A scholarship, a full scholarship, to study at the conservatory. This was beyond anything she had hoped for, beyond anything she had even allowed herself to dream about. And one more thing, the woman added, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Our summer showcase in August, the one you auditioned for today. We would like you to perform in it, and we'd like you to play that same piece, the Rachmaninoff. The auditorium seemed to spin around her. Elena gripped the edge of the piano bench to steady herself. You want me to perform? In the showcase? Not just perform, the silver-haired man said. We'd like you to open the entire program. First performance of the evening. Elena couldn't find words. Her mind was racing, trying to process everything that was happening. Just 10 minutes ago, she had been playing a simple Mozart piece, feeling like a failure. Now she was being offered a scholarship and asked to perform in one of the biggest musical events in the region. Elena somehow managed to walk off the stage without falling. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else, moving automatically while her brain struggled to catch up with what had just happened. A scholarship. A performance. Opening night of the summer showcase. The words kept repeating in her mind, but they still didn't feel real. She made it through the double doors and into the hallway beyond, where other students were gathered in small groups, waiting for their turn or comparing notes about their auditions. Several of them looked up as she passed, and a few nodded or gave her small smiles. One girl who looked about 19 or 20 actually stopped her. "That was incredible," the girl said quietly. "I was listening from the side door. You completely nailed that, Rachmaninoff." Elena mumbled something that might have been thank you, but she wasn't entirely sure what came out of her mouth. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching herself from a distance. She found her way back to the lobby where she had waited earlier. Her mother was sitting in one of the chairs near the window, reading something on her phone. When she saw Elena, she immediately stood up, concern flooding her face. "Honey, what happened? Are you okay? You look pale." Elena opened her mouth to explain, but suddenly everything hit her at once. The fear, the performance, the applause, the scholarship offer, all of it came crashing down, and she burst into tears right there in the middle of the lobby. Her mother rushed over and wrapped her arms around her, pulling her close. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's okay. Auditions are hard. There will be other opportunities." Elena shook her head against her mother's shoulder, trying to find her voice. "No, Mom, that's not why I'm crying." "Then what is it?" "They gave me a scholarship, and they want me to perform in the showcase. I'm opening the whole program." Her mother pulled back, holding Elena at arm's length, staring at her with wide eyes. "What?" Elena laughed through her tears, a strange, slightly hysterical sound. "I changed my piece at the last minute. I played the Rachmaninoff instead of the Mozart, and they loved it." "They actually loved it!" Her mother's hands flew to her mouth. "Elena, that's amazing. That's incredible." Then her expression shifted slightly. "Wait, you played the Rachmaninoff? The piece Mrs. Chen said you weren't ready for?" I know I wasn't supposed to. But in that moment, I just couldn't play something safe. I had to play something real." Her mother hugged her again, tighter this time. "I'm so proud of you. So proud." They stayed like that for a moment before Elena's mother pulled out her phone. "We need to tell your father. And we need to call Mrs. Chen." Oh my goodness, she's going to be so surprised. But Mrs. Chen wasn't at home when they called. Elena tried 3 times during the drive back, each call going to voicemail. It wasn't until they pulled into their driveway that Elena noticed Mrs. Chen's old sedan, parked on the street in front of their house. Her teacher was sitting on the front porch steps, her wooden cane resting beside her. When she saw Elena get out of the car, she stood up slowly, her face unreadable. Elena's heart sank. Mrs. Chen knew. Somehow she knew that Elena had been practicing the Rachmaninoff in secret, that she had disobeyed her teacher's judgment, that she had been arrogant enough to attempt a piece she had been explicitly told she wasn't ready for. "Mrs. Chen," Elena started, walking toward the porch. "I can explain. I know you said I wasn't ready for that piece, but..." Her teacher held up one hand, silencing her. For a long moment she just looked at Elena, her dark eyes searching, evaluating. Then slowly a smile spread across her weathered face. "I was there," Mrs. Chen said simply. "At the audition. I was sitting in the back row of the auditorium." Elena felt her jaw drop. "You were there? But how did you know I always attend the conservatory auditions. Every year. I like to see what the next generation of musicians can do." Mrs. Chen's smile widened. "I just didn't expect to see my own student get up on that stage. You heard me play?" "I heard everything. I heard you stop the Mozart. I heard you ask for permission to play something different. And I heard you play the Rachmaninoff." Mrs. Chen paused, her expression growing more serious. "You've been practicing it in secret, haven't you? Late at night when you thought no one would hear?" Elena felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. "I'm sorry. I know you said I wasn't ready. I wasn't trying to go against your teaching, You weren't ready," Mrs. Chen interrupted. 3 months ago you weren't ready. Your technique wasn't strong enough. Your emotional maturity wasn't there yet." She took a step closer, placing a hand on Elena's shoulder. "But today, on that stage, you were ready. Not because your technique had suddenly become perfect, not because you played every note flawlessly, but because you understood something crucial about music. What's that? That perfection isn't the point. Connection is the point. Honesty is the point. You played that piece today not to impress anyone, but because you needed to express something that words couldn't capture. That's what makes a real musician. And that's why I told you that you weren't ready before." Elena looked at her teacher in confusion. "I don't understand." Mrs. Chen's eyes twinkled with something that might have been mischief. "If I had told you that you could play the Rachmaninoff, you would have approached it as an assignment, as something to master and perfect. But because you thought you weren't supposed to play it, because you worked on it secretly just for yourself, you developed a real relationship with the music. You played it today the way it's meant to be played, with passion, with truth. So you're not angry? Angry?" Mrs. Chen laughed, a sound Elena rarely heard from her usually stern teacher. "I'm proud, more proud than I've been of any student in years." Elena felt tears threatening again, but these were different from all the other tears she had cried that day. These were tears of pure relief and gratitude. Her mother had been standing by the car, giving them space, but now she approached the porch. "Mrs. Chen, they offered Elena a full scholarship to the pre-college program." Mrs. Chen nodded. "I know. The judges spoke to me after Elena left. They wanted to know about her background, her training." She turned back to Elena. "They also asked if I would be willing to continue teaching you alongside your conservatory lessons." I said yes, of course. The next few hours passed in a blur. Elena's father came home from work and they celebrated with takeout pizza and sparkling cider. Jessica called, having heard the news somehow through the network of music students, and screamed so loudly over the phone that Elena had to hold it away from her ear. Her younger brother, who usually ignored anything related to her piano playing, actually gave her a high five and told his friends about it. But that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Elena found herself back in the basement, sitting at the piano in the dark. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't play anything. She just sat there, her hands resting gently on the keys, feeling the smooth ivory under her fingertips. Everything was going to change now. The showcase was in 4 months. She would need to practice the Rachmaninoff until it was polished, until every rough edge was smoothed away, until she could play it perfectly under pressure. She would be starting the pre-college program, meeting new teachers, learning new techniques, pushing herself harder than she ever had before. Part of her was terrified. What if today had been a fluke? What if she couldn't perform that well again? What if the judges had made a mistake and would regret their offer once they heard her play a second time? But another part of her, the part that had found the courage to stop playing the Mozart and start the Rachmaninoff, wasn't afraid. That part understood something important. The performance hadn't been about being perfect. It had been about being real, being honest, being willing to show people who she truly was through music. Elena placed her fingers on the keys and played a single chord softly, letting it ring out in the darkness. Then another, and another. Not the Rachmaninoff, not Mozart, not anything specific. Just sounds, just music, just the pure joy of creating something beautiful in a cold basement where nobody was listening except her. And that was enough. The 4 months between the audition and the summer showcase moved both impossibly fast and painfully slow. Elena threw herself into preparation with an intensity that surprised even her. She practiced the Rachmaninoff every single day, sometimes for 3 or 4 hours straight, until her hands ached and her back hurt from sitting at the piano bench. Mrs. Chen worked with her twice a week now instead of once, refining every phrase, polishing every transition. They would spend entire lessons on just 8 bars of music, playing them over and over until Elena could perform them flawlessly in her sleep. Her teacher was relentless but patient, pushing her to reach higher while never making her feel inadequate. The pre-college program started in June, and Elena found herself surrounded by musicians who had been playing their entire lives, kids who had performed in competitions since they were 5 years old, teenagers who casually mentioned studying with famous teachers or performing at prestigious venues. At first, it was intimidating. She felt like an imposter among all these talented, confident young people. But slowly, she began to find her place. In music theory class, she discovered she had a good ear for harmony. In music history, she loved learning about the composers whose work she had been playing for years. And in her private lessons with Professor Martinez, one of the conservatory's senior faculty members, she began to understand that technique without emotion was empty, but emotion without technique was sloppy. She needed both. The coffee shop job became harder to balance with everything else. Elena's manager was understanding and reduced her hours, but she still showed up every Saturday morning at 6, still made lattes and wiped down tables, still collected her paycheck. Even with the scholarship covering her conservatory tuition, her family still needed help with other expenses. Pride had its place, but so did responsibility. Jessica came over one afternoon in late July, about 2 weeks before the showcase. She found Elena in the basement as usual, working through a particularly difficult passage in the Rachmaninoff for what must have been the 100th time. "You need a break," Jessica announced, flopping down on the old couch in the corner. "You've been down here for like 3 hours. I need to get this right," Elena said without stopping. "The showcase is in 12 days, and you've played this piece perfectly 1,000 times already. Come on, take a break. Talk to me." Elena finally stopped playing and turned to face her friend. "I'm terrified, Jess." "Of what?" "You're going to be amazing. You were amazing at the audition." "That was different. That was just for 3 judges and a handful of students. This is a real performance. There will be hundreds of people there. What if I freeze up? What if I forget the notes? What if my hands shake so badly I can't play?" Jessica got up from the couch and sat down on the piano bench next to Elena. "Remember in 8th grade when you helped me with my science presentation? I was so scared I was going to throw up in front of the whole class. You know what you told me?" Elena shook her head. "You said that being nervous meant I cared about doing well, that the fear was just proof that it mattered to me. And you said that once I started talking, once I got into the material, the fear would fade into the background because I'd be too focused on the content to worry about being scared." Elena smiled despite herself. "I said that?" "You did, and you were right, and the same thing is going to happen to you. Once you start playing, once your fingers touch those keys, you're going to forget about the audience. You're going to forget about being scared. It'll just be you and the music." "How do you know?" "Because I've seen you play. When you really get into it, the whole world disappears for you. That's your gift, Elena. Don't let fear take that away." The night before the showcase, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through every bar of the Rachmaninoff, checking for potential problem spots, worrying about everything that could go wrong. Around 2 in the morning, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mrs. Chen. "Stop worrying. You're ready. Get some sleep. Trust yourself." Elena smiled in the darkness and finally managed to drift off. The day of the showcase arrived hot and humid, typical for August. Elena's family arrived at the conservatory early, her mother fussing with Elena's dress, her father checking and rechecking that they had everything they needed, her brother complaining about having to wear nice clothes. Mrs. Chen met them in the lobby, looking elegant in a long black gown that Elena had never seen her wear before. Backstage was chaos. Performers rushed around in formal wear, warming up on practice pianos in small rooms, comparing notes with each other, dealing with last-minute crises. Elena found a quiet corner and ran through finger exercises, trying to keep her hands loose and warm. A stage manager appeared at her side. "You're up first. 5 minutes, 5 minutes." Elena felt her heart start to pound. Her palms were already sweating. She wiped them on her dress and immediately felt guilty for potentially staining the fabric. Then she reminded herself that none of that mattered. Only the music mattered. She walked toward the stage entrance and suddenly Mrs. Chen was there, placing both hands on Elena's shoulders. "Listen to me," her teacher said firmly. "You've done the work. You've put in the hours. You know this piece inside and out. But none of that matters if you don't remember why you're playing it." "What do you mean?" "At the audition, you played from your heart. You played because you needed to say something that only music could express. That's what made it special. That's what made it real. So tonight, don't play for the judges or the audience or even for yourself. Play for the music. Play because this piece deserves to be heard and you're the one who gets to bring it to life." Elena nodded, feeling some of the tension ease from her shoulders. Mrs. Chen was right. She had spent so much time worrying about technique and perfection that she had almost forgotten the most important thing: the connection, the emotion, the truth. The stage manager gestured that it was time. Elena took a deep breath and walked through the curtain onto the stage. The auditorium was packed. Every seat was filled. She could see faces in the front rows, see the stage lights reflecting off glasses and jewelry, see people settling into their seats with programs in their laps. Somewhere out there were her parents, her brother, Jessica, Mrs. Chen. Somewhere out there were the judges who had believed in her. Somewhere out there were people who had come just to hear music, to experience something beautiful on a summer evening. Elena walked to the piano and sat down. The bench was at the perfect height. The stage lights were warm but not too hot. The piano, a magnificent Steinway grand, gleamed under the lights. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingers, feeling the weight of the keys as she pressed down gently. The auditorium grew quiet. That complete silence that comes before music begins when everyone is waiting, holding their breath ready to listen. Elena closed her eyes. She thought about the 11-year-old girl sitting in her aunt's living room, hearing this piece for the first time and crying without knowing why. She thought about all those late nights in the basement, practicing in secret, falling in love with every chord and phrase. She thought about the cold piano in her basement with the sticky middle C, about the coffee shop where she wiped tables to pay for lessons, about Mrs. Chen's patient instruction and unwavering belief. And then she began to play. The opening chord thundered through the auditorium exactly as it had 4 months ago, powerful and honest and real. But this time Elena didn't stumble on any of the runs. This time her timing didn't waver. This time, the months of practice and preparation combined with the raw emotion she had felt at the audition to create something even more complete, even more fully realized. She poured everything into the performance, every ounce of fear and hope and uncertainty about her future, every moment of doubt and every moment of confidence, every sacrifice her family had made to support her, every hour Mrs. Chen had devoted to teaching her. All of it flowed through her fingers into the music. The audience disappeared. The stage disappeared. There was only the piano and the notes and the feeling of being completely, utterly present in a single moment. When the final chords rang out and faded into silence, Elena opened her eyes. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the entire auditorium erupted in applause. People were standing, clapping, some of them calling out. She could see her mother in the third row with tears streaming down her face. She could see Mrs. Chen standing near the back, her hands clasped together, smiling with pride. Elena stood and took a bow, her legs shaking but her heart soaring. As she walked off stage, she realized something important. This wasn't the end of anything. It was just the beginning. There would be more performances, more challenges, more moments of doubt and fear. But she had proven to herself that she could do this, that she could stand on a stage and share something real with the world. Backstage, several other performers congratulated her. The stage manager gave her a thumbs up. And when she finally made her way back to the lobby where her family was waiting, she was wrapped in hugs and surrounded by love. Later that night, back home, Elena found herself once again in the basement with her piano. But this time she wasn't practicing or preparing. She was just playing for the pure joy of it, letting her fingers,